Grand Rising. I haven't done these in a while, but here I am. I want to talk to you about the sovereign human. I think about these topics a lot, and you have these pillars of the sovereign human that go into the financials, the health, the mind, the thinking, the family unit, and there's a couple other things, but you can all add those under those 4 pillars, I would say, or 3 even. And I think it's important that we think about this as leaders, as men, as women, leaders to our families, leaders to our children, leaders to our community. And in some form, I've been thinking about this stuff since I'm probably 14 years old, I would say. It's the first time I dove deep on these topics, and surely I couldn't put a label on this when I was younger, but the geopolitical side of things is has been going through me for a long time, and maybe even too early, right? Because I read a lot of heavy books already when I was like 14 years old, 13, and I learned what goes on in the background quite early, which probably had an influence on my way of handling substances in the years after that, for sure, right? Because my view on the world was just very negative. And the reason for that is that I have the influx of war on both sides of my families, right? And so from both parents, right? And on the one hand, a more recent war, when I was not even conceived yet, so before my mom got pregnant, and during and after pregnancy, this whole thing flared up. So all these unconscious and subconscious programs and all the pain was very present on that side of my family, and therefore in my whole family. And then on the other hand, my German side, the war wasn't as recent, but it was still there, right? And just a generation before my father. So there was a lot of stuff that my parents had to go through and got to go through in regards to that. And I think a lot of that stuff isn't conscious to them, which it's just the way it is, right? Like, not everybody is able to sometimes see things differently, right? Like when you're in the midst of it, it's very difficult to take the bird's eye view, right? Not everybody has that gift. And I think it's important that we talk about this because, especially in this day and age, we kind of have to take that sovereignty back. We have to be able to make smart decisions. We have to be able to think properly. We have to take our health into our own hands, right? Which is what I'm working on with the academy, for example, because no doctor out there will do it for you, no government, and quite frankly, nobody gives a shit about your health apart from someone that is interested in making you better and has an interest in that, right? But what does that mean? In essence, it means that you have to take your financials into your own hands. You have to take your health into your own hands, and you have to make sure that you have your thinking straight, and that you get that thinking back into your own system, and that you don't outsource it, right? Because just have a look around what we've outsourced. We've outsourced our financials, we've outsourced our thinking, our minds, and our health, and our families, right? Have a good think about this, right? That's the complete opposite of being sovereign, right? And being a sovereign human and leading our families properly, right? Because how can it be the right thing to have the government educate our children? How can it be the good thing and the right thing to have your thinking outsourced to some institution, to some program on the TV, to someone else? How can it be good to have your health be outsourced to someone else? Does not make any sense, right? So have a think about this, because it's important, because I will clearly help you in the first instance with your health if you want my help, because that is something that I am much better at than many people that I've met and most people that I've met. And so you can choose who you want to work with, who you want to get your education from, who you want to consult with. But those couple pillars that I just talked about are crucial for you to take your life back into your own sphere, to be able to live life on your own terms and not on the government's terms, and not being sick and unhealthy and with a rotten mind that cannot even focus for 5 minutes. So the sovereign human, I think it's at the basis of a good life. I think it's at the basis of a healthy lifestyle. And for that you need education. For that you need to understand what you're up against. You need to understand what goes on in this world, right? And what goes on in the background. And we kind of grew up trusting and giving our trust to the government and the governmental institutions, and I just naturally never did that. Surely that's all driven by pain and my experience within my family, and within all the people that have suffered and that I've seen that have been suffering, especially when I was younger. So it was natural to me, it was just the way it is, right? I didn't need to learn that. And it was definitely to an unhealthy extent as well, right? Like, it was and still is quite difficult for me to trust. I don't trust easily, and so maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But my substance use that started around 14 with alcohol was definitely an unhealthy relationship with these substances, right? Like with any substance, I don't have a healthy relationship with most substances, so I need to be able to control them, and I need to be able to have a healthy way of dealing with stuff that can be addictive, right? Through time I learned that. Through time I did a lot of work, of course. But that was my thing, that was my path, that was my my way of learning how to navigate this world. So the sovereign human, health is what I'm going to teach you, the basics from the ground up, how you can really understand what goes on out there, because you're being bombarded with toxins on a daily basis and you have no idea. And that's the sad part. We think we're eating healthily, we think we're eating some stuff that looks like is good for us, but we have no idea how it's being sprayed numerous times before it ends up on our plate. And all these topics that I will go into more depth on my academy, but it starts with the water and it starts with the way you go to bed and how you get up, and with the nutrition and with the movement and with the mental parts of it, with the unconscious and subconscious programs that is a topic for a bit later, because first we have to clean this vessel, right? We have to detox and cleanse, and then we have to give the body whatever it needs to be able to rebuild itself properly, right? Because it's aching, it's having problems getting that load out of the system, because it's just gotten so much and it's become a burden to the body, to the organs. It cannot detox itself sufficiently anymore. We're not 20 years back. Our parents had a different setup. Especially these last 20 years, toxic load has just increased exponentially, and so we need to be able to acknowledge that, and we need to be able to stop listening to people that have learned the old system. And I'm specifically talking about doctors and professionals that have learned the old ways, and there's a lot of good stuff in what they've learned, but we're not in that old timeline anymore. We live in a different world right now, so just be aware of that, who you get advice from, because I've spent well into the 6 figures on my healing journey, and I've seen probably almost everything out there. And I grew up in a family of doctors and nurses, and a lot of medicine men, so to speak, Eastern medicine, but also Western medicine. So I've grown up with this. I know the differences. I know what the system taught the medical professional, and what they didn't teach the medical professional. And I studied with a lot of doctors that showed me what they had to go through to be able to get to this level, that they worked with me on whatever needed to be worked on, right? So because it was all extracurricular, if you want to say so, right? It all was after they left uni. And 95, maybe 98% of professionals out there, they stop learning after they leave university and once they start their practice, right? Which means it's all just the old stuff that they've been taught by the government. Clearly, universities are in essence government institutions, right? And then after they get the license from the government to be able to practice law or medicine, and what does that mean? It means they have to operate within a system. And what I learned is that the really good ones, they all had problems with the system, because they were working with different types of approaches to health, which the system does not want, right? So a lot of these were my mentors afterwards, and who I learned from, and who I got my knowledge from, my practical knowledge. And it's all based on practical knowledge. It's not book stuff, right? So because it's not gonna help. Anyways, I have to go. I'm late for my PT gym session, and I hope that made sense. I hope this opens your eyes a little bit. I hope this gave you a different viewpoint. If you have any questions, just DM me on Instagram, and keep an eye out on the academy. It's practically almost finished, and so it will go live soon, and this will be your gateway to a different life. You will learn how to take your health into your own hands, right? Which is so crucial. All right, have a good one.